Imagine a perfect family portrait. A husband and wife, deeply in love, smiling warmly. Donald is a successful financial consultant with 3 degrees, including an MBA from Harvard. Tracy is the charismatic owner of a small business. They live in a cozy cottage in Boston, raising 2 bright, charming sons. On weekends, their home is filled with the laughter of neighbors at barbecues and the crack of a baseball bat as they play with their kids. They are the American dream personified. For decades, this was their reality. They were friendly, confident, and completely ordinary. But what if the entire picture, the names, the careers, the accents, their very identities, was an elaborate performance? What if the people their friends, colleagues, and even their own children thought they knew simply didn't exist? This isn't the plot of a movie. For one family, this elaborate illusion came crashing down on a hot summer day with a single fateful knock on the door, forcing them to speak a language they hadn't used in years. Don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. You are not here by accident. On the 27th of June, in the year 2010, the Heathfield Foley household was in a celebratory mood. It was their eldest son, Tim's 20th birthday. The Boston air was thick and warm. The family had just returned from a favorite Indian restaurant and opened a bottle of champagne for a quiet toast. Their younger son, 16-year-old Alex, had just gotten back from a trip to Singapore. The day was far from over. The boys were planning to go to a party, and Tracy had meetings with real estate clients. Donald was scheduled to fly out on a business trip that night. Life was moving along, predictable and comfortable. Then came the knock. Tracy remembers her husband saying, "It must be a surprise for you," thinking Tim's friends had arrived early. He opened the door, saw who was there, and his face changed. "A surprise," he managed to say. Tracy knew instantly. A bad surprise. When she opened the door, she was met with a line of somber figures in dark suits. There was no point in resisting. For a moment, the sons, Tim and Alex, thought it was the most elaborate birthday prank ever. They imagined their dad had hired a company that specialized in fake FBI raids. The idea that their parents, their ordinary American parents, could be involved in anything real was simply unthinkable. The illusion was too perfect. But as the agents entered, their words shattered that reality. "You are under arrest. We will explain everything later." Handcuffs clicked into place. The boys' faces were a canvas of confusion and fear. They were certain it was all a terrible mistake. Their mom and dad, agents for a foreign power, it was impossible. They had grown up believing their parents were Canadian-born Americans. They had no idea they even had Russian roots. Elena and Andre were taken away in separate vehicles. Their phones were confiscated. The boys were left utterly alone in a house that suddenly felt like a stage set. It would be 2 full weeks before Elena learned what had become of them, that they had checked into a hotel using their own savings, and that 20-year-old Tim had filed for official guardianship of his 16-year-old brother to keep him out of the state's care. When they tried to go home, they found the house ransacked by investigators, a shell of what it once was, with their valuable possessions gone. For 2 weeks, isolated from the world in a detention facility, Elena was tormented by one thought. Would her children ever be able to forgive her? For the first 2 weeks of questioning, they maintained their cover. They were Donald Heathfield and Tracy Foley, citizens of the United States. They held to this story until official representatives from the Russian Federation arrived and confirmed a deal was in place. Only then were they instructed to admit who they truly were. The public hearing in New York was a media circus, but Tim and Alex weren't there. By then, they had been forced to confront the truth, that the unbelievable accusations against their parents were real. The shock was profound. Their parents had chosen this life, this profession. They understood the risks, but the boys had been living in a completely different world, one built on a foundation of secrets they never knew existed. Their real names were Andrei Bezrukov and Elena Vavilova. They were not from Montreal, but from the Soviet city of Tomsk. And they were not American entrepreneurs. They were professional, deep-cover intelligence officers for Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR. Their specific mission remains classified to this day, and likely will be for at least another 50 years. All that can be said is that the information they gathered, at constant risk to their lives, was considered uniquely valuable. They were part of a larger network of illegals agents operating without official diplomatic cover, and their exposure sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. Their discovery wasn't due to a mistake or a slip-up. It was the result of a high-level betrayal. A senior figure within their own agency had provided their identities to American authorities. This figure, later identified as Colonel Alexander Poteyev, fled just before the arrests were made. In the years since, strange rumors have surfaced about his fate, with some reports claiming he passed away in the United States in 2016, while other sources suggest this was an elaborate piece of disinformation. The truth remains as murky as the world these agents inhabited. Just one day after their hearing, the agents were put on a plane. In a scene straight out of a Cold War film, the exchange took place on the tarmac of the Vienna airport. Two planes, one from Russia and one from the US, landed and lowered their stairs in perfect synchronization. The group of 10 Russian agents, including Andrei and Elena, walked down and were ushered into vans, which drove them to the opposite plane. The entire world press was there to capture the moment. Going the other way, onto the American plane, were 4 individuals who had been imprisoned in Russia for working with Western agencies. One of them was a former military intelligence colonel named Sergei Skripal. At the time, his name was just one on a list. Few could have imagined that 8 years later, he would be at the center of a major international incident in Salisbury, England, that would bring global relations to a breaking point. As her plane took off, Elena wasn't thinking about geopolitics. Her mind was on her children. She didn't know where they were, if they were still in America, or if they had already been taken to Russia. For any parent, but especially for an intelligence officer, children are the ultimate vulnerability. The decision to have a family while living under deep cover is one of the most agonizing choices an agent can make. The legendary Soviet spy couple Morris and Lona Cohen, who were instrumental in gathering information on the atomic program, worked for decades in the West, but never had children, deeming the risk too great. A famous Soviet film about intelligence work even features a dramatic plot point where a radio operator's mission is compromised during childbirth. So why did Elena and Andrei take that risk? Elena dismisses the cinematic drama, noting that modern medicine made the process manageable. They meticulously prepared, attending courses together, and Andrei was present for both births to monitor everything and everyone. They simply dreamed of having a family. But they could have never imagined that one day, their own children would question that decision. In the difficult months after their arrival in Moscow, their sons, struggling to adapt to a country and a truth they never knew, sometimes voiced the painful thought, maybe if your profession was so dangerous, you shouldn't have had kids at all. For weeks, Andre and Elena were held in separate high-security isolation units, designed for the most dangerous individuals. Inmates wore brightly colored jumpsuits, a grim reminder that it made them easier targets in an escape attempt. One day, another inmate walking in the corridor slid a newspaper under Andre's door. On the front page was his own face. "Is this you?" the man asked. Andre tried to deny it. "It's a mistake." The man, a notorious bank robber, just smiled. "It's okay," he said. "I hate them too." It was in that strange moment of camaraderie with a hardened criminal that Andre felt a wave of relief. The center knew. His picture was in the papers, which meant their government was aware of the situation. They wouldn't be abandoned. That very jumpsuit Elena was given in the American facility is what she wore when she heard the court's decision, and when she boarded the plane back to a home she barely knew. It, along with a few family photo albums later returned by their lawyers, was all they had left from over 2 decades of life in the United States. Everything else, their house, their cars, their bank accounts, even their personal belongings, was forfeited to the US government. In another stunning detail, they were legally required to sign a document vowing that if they ever wrote a book or profited from their story in the West, all royalties would be turned over to the United States government. But back in that detention facility in the summer of 2010, they were consumed by a single question: what did we do wrong? Where did we make the mistake that led to this failure? They didn't know it yet, but they hadn't made a mistake. In espionage, just as in life, there is no insurance against betrayal. Their deepest regret wasn't being caught. It was that their work was cut short. As professionals, they were deeply invested in their mission and in serving their country. "I regret that we didn't get to finish the job," Andre would later say. "If we could have continued to work and bring value to our country where it was needed, I would have been happy." Their story began in the old Siberian city of Tomsk, where a young Elena Vavilova grew up. The daughter of a physicist and a teacher, she was a brilliant and curious child, involved in everything from music and figure skating to acting. In university, the beautiful and intelligent student caught the eye of many, including a young man named Andrei Bezrukov. But she also caught the eye of certain other people who saw in her a unique potential. When she was approached with a special kind of job offer, she worried what it would mean for her relationship with Andre. It wasn't until they both confessed that they had accepted the same clandestine career path that Andre made a second proposal marriage. Their lives from that moment on were fused, not just by love, but by a shared, secret purpose. They spent years training, shedding their old selves and learning to become other people, mastering the subtle gestures and cultural nuances of the West, right down to the American way of counting on their fingers. Today, Andrei Bezrukov is a professor at a prestigious Moscow university, and Elena Vavilova is a published author. Their sons, Tim and Alex, after a long and difficult legal battle, successfully regained their Canadian citizenship and have forged their own paths, reconciling with their parents' past while building futures in the West. Their story is a powerful testament to the human cost of a hidden world. It's a story of a family built on a lie, but held together by a real and powerful love. It's a story of loyalty, betrayal, and the unimaginable pressure of living 2 lives at once. The tale of Donald and Tracy, Andre and Elena, forces us to wonder about the nature of identity itself. They successfully became other people for over 20 years, fooling everyone, including their own children. It leaves us with a lingering question: what sacrifices are we willing to make for a cause we believe in? And can the bonds of family ever truly survive the weight of such monumental secrets? How do you become someone else entirely? Not just for a day, but for decades. Imagine erasing your past, your language, your very identity to blend seamlessly into a foreign land. For two people known to their American neighbors as Tracy and Donald, this wasn't a hypothetical question. It was their life. They had a picture-perfect home, two bright children, and a successful business. But beneath this suburban dream lay a secret so profound, it would eventually shake the world. In their previous life, they were Elena and Andrei, students in the Soviet Union. The first photo shows them at their modest wedding in Tomsk, young and unassuming. The second photo, taken just 5 years later, shows a completely different pair, confident, stylish, and thoroughly Western. They are no longer Elena and Andrei, they are Tracy and Donald. The change is more than just clothes or a haircut. It's in their eyes, their posture, their very essence. They have become foreigners. It's a common observation that you can often spot people from Eastern Europe abroad, even if they're dressed like locals. There's a certain look, a hint of tension, or a different kind of confidence that gives them away. So how did Elena and Andrei manage to not just pretend, but to genuinely live as American citizens for decades, completely undetected? The answer lies in a set of unbreakable rules they had to internalize until it became second nature. To pull off this transformation, they first needed the right tools. Back home, everything they owned was Soviet-made. To acquire a completely foreign wardrobe and all the necessary accessories, they were sent on a carefully planned, one-day trip to Berlin. Stepping into a Western department store, their eyes widened at the sheer variety. This was the first step in shedding their old selves. Elena studied foreign women for hours, mimicking their smiles, their confident posture, their effortless optimism. It was an attitude she had to practice until it was no longer an act, but a part of her new identity, her second self. Even the smallest habits had to be relearned. Americans, for instance, count on their fingers differently, starting with the index finger. It's a tiny detail, but in their line of work, tiny details are everything. The rule book for these deep-cover operatives was strict and unforgiving, governing every aspect of their existence. The first rule was absolute: leave everything from your home country behind. When they left for their new life, they carried a single suitcase containing one set of clothes. Everything else had to be acquired in the West. The second rule was a vow of silence. They were never, under any circumstances, to speak their native language. Not a single word. It was a principle they followed religiously. The third rule concerned their work: never speak about it where anyone could possibly listen. This made discussions at home or in the car impossible, as listening devices could be placed anywhere. To talk freely, they had to go outside, to a park or a public space where they controlled the environment and could see everyone around them. Regular strolls, especially once they had children, became a perfect and natural-looking cover for these vital conversations. The fourth and perhaps most challenging rule was to think only in the language of their new country. An operative, they were taught, doesn't know Russian. If you were to wake them up in the middle of the night, their subconscious would respond in English. Over time, thinking in your native language simply fades away. It's a fascinating mental shift that happens when you completely cut off communication in your mother tongue. the ultimate test. If you were walking across your lawn and accidentally stepped on a nail, your instinctive cry of pain wouldn't be in Russian. It would be, "Oops." This complete mental immersion was their armor. With brilliant training and natural talent, Elena and Andrei became true Americans. It's a strange thought that while Elena was living her new life in Montreal, the narrator of the original documentary was also there, working as a foreign correspondent. They could have passed each other on the street, two people from the same world living in two different realities, never knowing they would one day meet to tell this very story. So, what would happen in an unexpected crisis? Imagine walking down a street in Boston when an old university classmate from Tomsk spots you and runs towards you with open arms, shouting your real name. In such an extreme situation, there is only one option: pretend you have no idea who they are, claim they've made a mistake, and leave as quickly as possible. Afterward, you'd be left to anxiously analyze the encounter, wondering if anyone noticed the strange interaction. An ancient Chinese treatise on strategy says the most effective operatives should have an unremarkable appearance, but possess immense courage and a sharp intellect. For Elena and Andrei, composure, intelligence, and self-control were far more important than looks. But even with the perfect mindset, you can't officially exist without documents. To become new people, they needed new histories, and that's where the ghost stories began. As a former head of the American agency would later describe their case, many operatives lived under the identities of people who had passed away long ago. Donald Heathfield was the real name of a Canadian diplomat's son who had died as an infant in 1962. Tracy Lee Ann Foley was the daughter of a French teacher from Montreal, who also passed away in early childhood. Armed with these birth certificates and a change of clothes, the two Soviet students were dropped into a new world. They had to build their new pasts from scratch, inventing every single detail: the town where they were born, the schools they attended, the names of their classmates, even the color of the curtains in their childhood bedroom. This is what's known as creating a legend. Elena described how she would sometimes pick a random person on the street and mentally cast them as an old acquaintance from her fabricated past. Later, when telling stories to new friends, she would vividly picture that person's face. After many years, she admitted she sometimes caught herself genuinely believing her own invented memories, blurring the line between fiction and reality. Just as their new life seemed to be settled, an event shook not only their family, but the entire world. A year after the birth of their eldest son, Alex, the Soviet Union collapsed. For operatives in the field, it was a time of immense uncertainty and hardship. When they saw the Soviet flag being lowered for the last time on a CNN broadcast from a hotel room in Buffalo, they wept. With the dissolution of the USSR, the entire system that supported them vanished. The center could no longer provide financial assistance. A message came through from now on: you are on your own. You must earn your own living and cover all your own expenses. They were left to rely solely on themselves. In quiet moments in parks or by the river, the couple would speak in hushed English tones, using hints and half-phrases to discuss their future. Was their work even needed anymore? The immense stress began to take a physical toll. Elena suddenly developed a severe and painful skin condition. Doctors were baffled they couldn't find a cause for the affliction in a perfectly healthy young woman. Outwardly, Tracy remained calm, cheerful, and sociable. No one knew the turmoil she was experiencing inside. For her, her country was her motherland, a concept far bigger than any particular government. It was the small, snowy town where she was born, the streets she grew up on, her family. Her commitment was to her homeland, and she had sworn an oath. For them, there was no other way. They had to continue. To survive, Tracy and Donald had to become entrepreneurs. They started a small family business delivering children's diapers, a novel service at the time. It was surprisingly successful. In the beginning, Andre, now Donald, drove the delivery truck himself. As the business grew, they hired other drivers. Eventually, they sold the company, which continues to operate successfully to this day, delivering diapers to hundreds of Canadian mothers. While living in a snow-covered Moscow years later, Elena would recall her picture-perfect life as a Canadian homemaker. According to their cover story, they were Catholics. The center had trained them in the basic rites, and they had memorized all the necessary prayers in French. They maintained this identity throughout their lives. At one point, to complete a specific assignment, Elena even had to join the choir at a local Catholic church. She offered her services and spent several months singing every Sunday. Meanwhile, Donald worked during the day and studied at night. Over the course of the 90s and 2000s, Andrei Bezrukov, under the name Donald Heathfield, earned a degree from York University in Toronto, and later, a master's degree from Harvard. The family even moved to Paris for a time so he could complete his studies. In 1999, the Foley-Heathfield family moved to the United States, settling in a respectable neighborhood in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Life here was different from Canada. They had to adapt again. Americans, they noted, woke up very early. If their son had a hockey game at 5 in the morning, they had to get up and take him. They lived in a townhouse, never quite managing to move to a detached house in the suburbs, as they were so accustomed to city life. That house stands empty to this day. By then, Tracy was working as a real estate agent, and the family's fortunes were on the rise. Donald was heading a major consulting firm. A successful deep-cover agent is like a fine wine, they only get better with age. With each passing year, their network of contacts grows, their understanding of the environment deepens, and their access to valuable information increases. They were at the peak of their careers. So why did it all come to an end? The answer is the one thing no operative can prepare for: an act of disloyalty from within. In 2010, their carefully constructed world came crashing down. A high-ranking officer in their own service, a man named Alexander Potayev, had been secretly working with the Americans. He provided the information that exposed the entire network of 10 agents, including Tracy and Donald. It was a stunning blow, orchestrated not by a foreign agency, but by one of their own. The news sent shockwaves around the world. In Russia, a doctor named Boris Kozlov, who had been hopelessly in love with the beautiful Elena during their university days, was stunned to see his college muse on the international news, dressed in an orange jumpsuit. He always knew she was destined for something remarkable, but he never imagined her in the role of a modern-day Mata Hari. The agents were returned to Russia in a dramatic exchange. But what kind of reception awaited them in a country that was vastly different from the one they had left? Upon their arrival, the entire group was personally received by the nation's leader, Vladimir Putin. It was a warm and moving meeting. The leader expressed his deep respect for their profession, acknowledging the immense personal cost of their work. To master a foreign language, to think and speak in it, and to serve your country for years without diplomatic protection. Facing daily risk it is, he said, an incredibly difficult fate. The motherland welcomed its operatives as heroes. They were given the chance to rediscover their own country, traveling from the far east of Kamchatka to the Black Sea. For Elena and Andrei, it was a strange homecoming. They had to learn how to be Russian again, to make new friends and reconnect with a culture they had only observed from afar for 2 decades. Andrei Loskutov, a public figure who traveled with them, recalled their journey of reacclimation. Today, Andrei Bezrikov is a respected professor and political analyst in Moscow. Elena Vavilova has written books about her experiences. They rebuilt their lives, but the story of Tracy and Donald remains a powerful legend. It's a testament to a life lived on the knife's edge of identity, a story of profound dedication and the ultimate sacrifice. It leaves us with a lingering question after living so convincingly as someone else. How do you find your way back to who you truly are?